No, my name's Stuart Hosking-Durn. I'm head of central operations for Morecambe Bay. We're a integrated care provider trust with both acute and community services. We cover approximately 1,000 square miles of the Morecambe Bay area, which is North Lancashire, South Cumbria, and employ about 8,500 staff. So in my remit, my background principally is emergency planning, crisis management, BCM, but I'm also now responsible for clinical site management, patient flow, the transfer of care hub, all the COVID response is still ongoing, all the industrial action response is ongoing, emergency planning and security. So quite a broad portfolio that brings me to where I am today.
Thanks, Stuart. And Ian Eldridge here, formerly with South East Coast Ambulance Service for a number of years in the role of paramedic, and then also specialist operations, resilience, which covered pretty much of what you were just describing as your role as well there, Stuart. I retired from CCAM middle of last year to join Peter Stanley, and here we are now looking at how we support the wider NHS with Command, having been doing it on it for a number of years with fire and rescue services.
Yeah, and I think the game changer for those of us on the call who are acute or community care providers, or even now the ICBs, is that transition now into that new command and control structure more formally than ever has been done before. The Minimum Occupational Standards really raising the bar now, and certainly that comes on the backdrop of the Manchester Arena inquiries. And for those who haven't had sight of them, the Part 2 inquiry report is probably the one that I'd refer colleagues to the most, in that deals, if you like, with the blue light response and the care of casualties. But also as well, it talked about how that command and control structure comes about, and how some of the myths that come about, that people think that the ring 999 and there's a huge fleet of ambulances coming, isn't always the case. From an acute care provider's perspective, no one singular trust can respond to a major incident, certainly a mass casualty incident in its own right these days, given our levels of occupancy and demand. So there is a change now of how we are going to frame ourselves in the future, and therefore what does that mean for those command roles in making decisions in a timely way.
So I certainly agree with you there. I mean, I've seen it from both sides, as it were, from the acute NHS world to the obviously the ambulance world, and there is definitely a need for that command training and understanding to be in place, because us walking into hospitals and expecting them to have that wide understanding, it just isn't the case. So I think it's going down the right route actually to make sure that the minimum occupational standards are there, so that we're all really working from the same hymn sheet. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Stuart.
Absolutely. I think if you take the traditional view of a mass casualty incident that most hospitals prepare for, it was things like your Clapham rail disasters and sort of mass casualty events, RTC, things like that. Whereas now actually the world's changed. You've now got the Manchester Arena attack. You've got the attack on the Skripals with Novichok. You've got the attack on Alexander Litvinenko. Things are different out there, and we have to be ready to face different emergencies. We've seen recent bomb scares on NHS premises. Certainly the bomb that went off at Liverpool Women's Maternity Hospital in the car. It's now not singular incidents that we're having to prepare for. The landscape is changing, and therefore that means the decision making of the commanders is broader, and we have to get away from the reliance of a singular plan, because no plan is foolproof in that sense. So I think the new standards bring about a different set of competencies, both in knowledge and skills, that combined should help people think more dynamically in those moments.
Yes, and I think also from following on from that, as you say, those skills there, that for a number of years, JESSIP, so Joint Emergency Services Interoperability program, was brought in many years ago following a number of the major incidents, and is now very much embedded within the emergency services and actually going much wider. And I think that from the NHS perspective, to actually ensure that a lot of their commanders are actually well briefed in how the joint decision model, which is very widely used within part of JESSIP as how we work together, is very much understood, and they can walk straight into it rather than an incident taking place and then they're on the back foot straight away, which is, I think, can be very unfortunate, and certainly not not good for patient outcome.
No, and the joint decision-making model for the acute and the community care and the ICB colleagues on the call has to change slightly for us, in that the JDM very much focuses on that front-end incident management, and actually the consequence management for the NHS is much longer term. And certainly, as we're seeing with COVID, we've gone through several iterations of a COVID response plan, from those early days where it was a highly infectious disease. It's gone its full trajectories now. We've got the vaccine programs out there. It's now all about recovery of those activities and procedures that we lost during COVID. And so it's that, how do you reference those decisions you made at that point, bearing in mind it was at that point in time and space, and that things move and evolve. And actually the NHS will be recovering from COVID for at least another 2, 3, 4 or 5 years. And sometimes that joint decision-making model at the front end, if you take the managed arena inquiry, was all about making the situation safe, delivery of care and getting those casualties to the hospital, and the subsequent police investigation in terms of the crime. And it's how those two models have to meld in the future, that actually what's at the front end doesn't always marry them with what's at the back end.
Mm-hmm. And that's quite interesting, because that's sort of an area that is not new to me, but it's actually brings home that how we can't just all go with, you know, the one theme, as it were. So I think that's a very valid point. And again, each incident really is on its own merit as well, particularly where we're affecting the NHS, because it's such a wide area that's covered, as you've already alluded to, community as well as acutes. It's not just the acutes that get involved in something of this nature. I mean, for example, with flooding, has a massive effect overall on the wider NHS, not just certain areas of it.
I think if colleagues haven't watched the videos on YouTube from the arena inquiry, I think the reason for me why the Minimum Occupational Standards is so vitally important is they're putting so much emphasis on the competencies of those decision makers. What did you know? When were you trained? When have you exercised? Even down to far as what did you log? What didn't you log? And then I think that's a fundamental part of what some people will misunderstand, is that I don't have a logist, therefore I can't log. We can all individually log for ourselves, and best practice says, if in the absence of a logist, start making some notes of your own, because some notes are better than no notes in that circumstance. Yes,
and I mean that was going back to some of the significant incidents over the past. I think the shooting in London, where a very loaded police commander started writing notes on very much a scrap of paper, rather than actually getting the logbook out and starting to write down the details as they went on. So anything is, as you say, is very much better than nothing. And we've always worked on the basis that in the best practice, if you've actually got a commander that's got a support officer alongside them and a logist as well, absolutely great. But that doesn't always work, and often it does take some time to put that structure in place. Certainly from past experience, we've moved to as many trained logists as possible. Again, going back down the route that, where were they trained? What are their competencies? What's their experience? And all this, because it will be questioned at some stage. So it is best to to have the right people in the post, as it were, which I think also goes back to the Minimum Occupational Standards, that it actually says in there which roles are there, who should be performing those roles and everything to it.
And I think one of the challenges that we will face going forward is the finance challenge, that we are going through a period of industrial action. So colleagues are not wanting to take on any more tasks, if you like. I haven't got a budget to pay logists to be on standby. So therefore, I have got a team of logists who work Monday to Friday, 9 till 5. So on the best will of the world, if I've got an incident happening between those hours, I've got a fighting chance of getting a logist, but at 4 o'clock on a Sunday morning, I'm highly unlikely to. So it's how do we then move into that world where people will have to self-log in future for those first few hours while we build up an infrastructure around them, because more and more budgets are becoming tighter, that having on-call teams sat around is seen as a luxury, not a necessity. Now, one could argue that actually it is a necessity as category 1 and category 2 responders, but it's how do you convince the powers that be that actually that's diverting money away from clinical care and clinical services?
Yeah. And that's really been one of the struggles over certainly the last 10 years that, with my involvement, is actually getting that acknowledgement from the senior teams, directors, etc., when putting budgets together, as to what money is actually required to pull a team into place should an incident occur. And in a lot of cases, I've seen that it's been a case of, and I'm not quite exactly word for word, but it's, oh, well, we'll get through it one way or another. Well, actually, no, you won't get through it one way or another. It's reasonably foreseeable that it will occur, that you need to plan for it and budget for it. So it's not a case of, oh, well, we'll make do with something as we go through. But this also comes down to training commanders as well. A lot of trusts have also gone down the route that, you know, that a number of their commanders have been put in place. They think that's enough, but actually in the number of commanders available to form a rota, but often that's not the case, because you suddenly find that you may be dealing with cross-border incidents, national incidents, and so on, that you actually need a large number of commanders to support that. And there is expectation that, you know, everybody within certainly the emergency services and the NHS would actually participate with those.
And then one of the things that we're looking at as a trust, and I've now had the funding approval been granted, is that we're going to recruit a permanent team of tactical commanders. It has been acknowledged now that as a result of the COVID lessons, if you like, that we've already seen, you cannot sustain a business as usual working arrangement and respond to an ongoing week by week, month by month, year by year incident, and for there not to be a consequence somewhere else. So I'm very, very fortunate that I'm now in a situation in the next 2 weeks where adverts will go out to recruit a team, so that I will have one tactical commander on duty 24/7, and the rest of those people that have been on the traditional, if you like, gold and silver rotas will drop in a supportive role. That it'll be a best endeavours, but at least I can guarantee to have at least one tactical commander on the ground 24/7. Now, one could argue that I don't have a support officer, I don't have a logist 24/7, but we have to start somewhere, and at least by aligning that to the minimum occupational standards, we've set the benchmark for, right, what do these people need to be able to do? What do they need to be able to know and have to be able to enact at the time, acknowledging that there's probably 3 phases of the response that we're going to start planning for. So phase 1 will be that immediate, save the situation, if you like, secure the doors, prevent loss of life, protect staff, and then move into sort of that business continuity and recovery phase as and when you get the extra resources brought online. But certainly using the standards now as the benchmark, at least for the first time, gives us a training target. And having got the training target, you can at least set a budget to say, right, we need to have that number of that course, that number of that course, and you can start to put figures to it. So at least our finance colleagues can start to see, actually, this is based in some kind of evidence, not just somebody's wish list.
And I can understand where you're coming from. That really with the emergency services background, and albeit we are both 27 day a week organisations, we've had to run with command and control actually with a rota with the right number in place. I'd like to say that was always the situation, but that's only again in recent years that the understanding and going back to things like Brexit, actually, which actually did bring quite a strain on our particular organisation, and as did incidents such as flooding and COVID, that you do need to have that rota in place with the right number of people to be able to respond. But also the word there is the right person, because there are a number of people that have been sent to attend tactical coordination groups and strategic coordination groups that have been running that are not the right person to actually be in attendance, and very often they come away sometimes actually overwhelmed, which is not certainly not the right outcome either, but then wondering where do they go to actually take what actions that have been delivered to the organisations from. So and that's, I think, again, an understanding that we need to make sure that director level have that full understanding.
And certainly, as a lessons learned from the Storm Desmond incident in 2015, we did have that rota where if you were a Band 8A senior manager and above, you automatically went on the rota. And we had some really challenging conversations with colleagues after Storm Desmond, where you had HR colleagues saying, I really didn't know what I was doing. You really were setting up to fail. And so we, at that point, reduced the rota to be senior operations people only. And actually in the new world, when I get the tactical command role to put in place, there will be qualified nurses. So we're going down a clinically led model of the future. But I think it's also about acknowledging that for those organisations that run a 24 or even a 3-day, 4-day, 7-day rota pattern, you have to think about what is the life expectancy. And that sounds very horrible, but how long can somebody stay in command for in the middle of an incident? And it isn't 24 hours. So your rotas, whilst they are there in normal, if you like, peacetime, there needs to be an acknowledgement that in the event you flip into a response, something will have to change fairly quickly as well.
Yeah, and I can actually relate to that wholeheartedly, because it was one of the incidents that was a long ongoing one. I think actually was flooding, believe it or not, going back 2015 thereabouts. And as a tactical commander, I actually spoke to our strategic commander saying, you look absolutely shattered. You need to be looking at yourself, your own well-being, as it were. But of course, then you look behind and think, well, actually, who is there to support that person? And in the ideal world, we would have all the numbers of people, would have the right figures behind. It will probably never actually come to that level, but we have to plan as much as possible to put that in place.
Yes, but I think it's worth acknowledging now, isn't it, that we put these rotas together and we say to ourselves, that makes us civil contingencies act compliant because we have a rota. But if the rota won't survive first contact with the enemy, it's not a rota.
No.
So it's just sort of a lesson to learn that we've picked up through the COVID. And as a trust, we've spent the best part of £750,000 a year putting in place a permanent capability to respond to COVID in those first 2 years, because it was so full on, it was impossible to do it any other way.
Yeah, that's right. And that is good. So I think this is where going back to the minimum occupational standards, is that the training that's required to perform those roles is where we obviously come in, and we've looked at it from past history, particularly with fire and rescue and also ambulance services, as to who's trained, how they're trained, and what their competencies are, and actually confirmation that should it ever come to it, that they can actually show their certificate, their CPD, and say, well, they've actually gone through the motions, and it's not just a case of ticking a box, that they are actually there and the right person in place to deal with that.
And certainly as somebody that I sit on both a tactical rota and also a strategic advisors rota, the emphasis now, and it's really, really clear when you look at the arena inquiry, it's not just about the organisation taking responsibility for me, it's also about me taking responsibility for me. What am I doing to keep myself current? It's not just about, well, I went on that course. Even simple things around, at the moment, I'm encouraging all our tactical and strategic colleagues that keep a reflective journal of what you're going through the industrial action. That's all valuable learning about how to respond to changes of scenarios. We've had RCN strikes, we've had physio strikes, we've had the ambulance strikes. Monday, we've got a combined ambulance and nursing strike. So again, that will change the situation again. So each time you go through one of those scenarios, use that as a valuable learning experience. Don't just wait for the next course to come along, and also take on board the fact that the mindset that used to be within the EPRR core standards was that could you demonstrate you were compliant in a 3-yearly cycle? Those days are over as well. If you're expecting just to go on a course once every 3 years and remain competent, that won't hold up in court any longer. So think about your own role and what that experience will be like in a coroner's investigation or even in an inquiry. Is what did you do to keep yourself current alongside what your organisation was doing?
And I think that also bears with, as you say, as the individual, but also as the organisation. For example, I was involved in quite a number of communication exercises. I think every time you have an exercise or an incident, it seems that communications always comes out fairly much at the top as to who didn't speak to whoever and whatever from that side. But again, I think they're every 6 months. I don't know whether your organisation manages to achieve that every 6 months, but we found that on a number of occasions, it really was a very good learning experience for all the organisations that were involved as to how that communication worked, where it, I wouldn't say failed, but actually at times didn't meet what was going to be required of it, and certainly understanding from a number of individuals that thought, well, I would just get told anyway. Well, actually, no, it doesn't work that way.
No. And for a number of the blue light organisations, you've got access to airwave. Most NHS organisations don't. As we discovered during Storm Desmond, we had a layered approach to communication, which include mobile phone, home telephony, pages. But when you've got a wide-scale power outage, actually the resilience in those comms networks is really, really poor. So thinking about how then do you communicate with your key decision makers, the WannaCry incident where we housed our major incident plans on an internal secure network, when we had to shut those networks down because the network was under attack, you lost access to your plans. So it's all these kind of incremental learnings that come together now that how do you really test? Because we can do a comms test every 3 months and we can go down the list of people, right, we'll start at the chief exec and we'll work our way down to the porter and supervisor. Can you get hold of them within a 30-minute window? Yeah, great, tick in the box. But what happens when there's no power? What happens when there's no light? What happens when there's no nothing? It's those, we don't test strongly enough, I don't think.
No, and I'm not sure, again, in your particular, but we had at one stage a number of cell phones, which that also seems to have moved on as well, that they were available but no longer. And if they were, again, who'd been checking them, who'd been making sure that the batteries, so it's all systems as well to make sure that they're in place and up and running. Certainly, from over the years, having worked with a number of more acute trusts than anything, it's been really worthwhile making sure these comms exercises go ahead and that people are working with them and then taking stuff away, as opposed to actually, oh well, it didn't work there but it did work there, and forgetting about it. There are actions, and that's the point that as we're trying to get through, is that it is very much a case that when something is learned, that it's a method is put in place to pick up that learning and make sure that it gets put into daily practice.
Yeah. And that's where those reflection logs come into the fore, don't they? In that I went through this scenario and this is what I learned about it. What will I do differently next time? And therefore, what do I feed into the wider hot and cold debriefs around the organisational arrangements? Some of our colleagues have come forward now and said, well, I know I live in an area with poor mobile phone signal, for example. So if you expect me to be on call, I need a plan B. And we found plan B. We found multi-SIM calls. So therefore, we've got some of our colleagues who actually, although we live in the North Lancs, South Cumbria area, their mobile phone secondary backup is the Isle of Man. Okay. We can guarantee to get a signal from the Isle of Man. Now that's just a quirk of our geography, but it's those kind of things that you try and test and learn as you're going along. But if you simply just say to yourself, does our call cascade exercise work every 3 or 6 months? Yes. It will work if everything's working all right. It's what happens when they don't work okay. Yeah,
that's quite right. And as you say, systems put in place to back up systems that may fail as well. So it's very much there. What about the actual recording of the training and all the exercises and so on that you've attended to in the past? Have you got systems in place for that? And is that something that you would make sure that other colleagues would also work on?
So as an organisation, we've got what's called EPRG, the Emergency Planning and Resilience Group. So they receive quarterly reports on incidents and exercises in terms of what the incident was, what the immediate actions are in terms of lessons learned that have to be done right here and now, what are the bigger system, if you like, because sometimes it's not just about Morecambe Bay, the trust, having to make a change. It could be at an ICB level, it could be at a local authority level, whatever it may be. But if it's something feeding into the LRF, each of us who are on call have our own on-call packs, and in part of that pack, you keep all your training records, all your learning logs, your reflective journals. So it's all kept in one place. So there's two aspects of it. There's me as an individual. I have my nice big red portfolio that I carry around with me 24/7. But equally, organisationally, we have a repository. Teams has been a great adaptation for us. We now have a dedicated Teams channel for all our on-call commanders, and we can put things in there very, very quickly, links to training videos, links to PowerPoint presentations. It doesn't preclude the fact that you still need to go on those courses and do the training, but in those down times, if you like, those quieter moments that you might get in the middle of the night, for example, having those videos there to just refresh yourself. And even simple things, we've linked up with an organisation called Neil Jerd Associates, who do a really good leadership training package. So it's not just about saying you've got to do the mandatory EPRR courses. There's a leadership element to this as well. So make the opportunities to link with your learning and development colleagues around, right, what leadership programs are out there? How are we training people to lead? Because for a lot of people, if you don't come from a blue light or a military background, a lot of this is alien to you. Because we do very much live in a, I don't want to use the word death by committee, but it very much feels like that in the NHS, doesn't it? There needs to be a group consensus in order for us to make a decision to move forward. Well, at 4 o'clock on a Sunday morning, that group isn't going to be there. It will be on your shoulders to make that decision. Therefore, you've got to have that skill set behind you.
Yeah, and I think that's where, going back over the years, certainly the integration of the EPRR, the groups that were formed from that, the EPRRG groups, that's where a lot of it was picked up, particularly with the integration of the different services. So whether it be community, acutes, ambulance, or whatever together, making sure that they were actually working jointly to achieve all of that, which is what, a little bit much the same as working back to the JESOP of working together as the central objective as to what it's all about. The other part, really, from my perspective, is we've gone through, we've got the occupational standards coming through, and we were very briefly talking about timescales on this at the very outset of the conversation. I say I've not seen written confirmation of the dates that these need to be adhered to as such, but it's good practice anyway, I would think, to actually get it through as quickly as possible for any of the organisations that are involved in this. It's very much a case of going back to, as you say, things like the Manchester Arena and so on, and actually looking at the learning outcomes from that, well, this is going to be best practice. Let's make sure it gets put in sooner rather than later. And a lot of it is going back to the individual trusts, to making sure, well, actually, how do we buy into these schemes to make sure that we are achieving what's needed?
Yeah, so there's a couple of schemes running at the moment. So there's Principles of Health Command, which is run by NHS England, and they've got 2 course options, both of which are 4 hours long, and it's a webinar PowerPoint session. That has to be completed at 75% by the 31st of March and at 100% by the 1st of July. The Minimum Occupational Standards, there's been a different set of conversations going on now. Some of this predates the industrial action, and there was a talk about people should be moving towards that by the 1st of July this year, and they're now talking about the 1st of December this year. I think at some point, as an organisation, as you quite rightly said, you're going to have to take an organisational view on what your cut-off point is going to be. Now, part of that is going to be down to the fact that we are living in a world where the NHS doesn't have a winter and a summer season anymore. Those days are gone. So a lot of organisations used to say, well, we'll play catch up with training in the summer. It doesn't work. But equally, we know that the winters are getting harder and harder. The industrial action doesn't show any signs of abating at the moment. Now, as a trust, we've taken a commitment to say that we'll get this done by the 1st of July, because the danger is at some point in the future, another incident happens, you end up in another inquiry, and the inquiry chair says, well, hang about, these standards were published in July of 2022. Here we are in 2023, 24, and you've achieved what? Where was your commitment? So it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be cheap. There will be operational impacts of releasing people to be trained, but I don't see us now having any option but to bite the bullet and say, this is now the must-do show on the road in terms of making sure that we can defend ourselves in the future. Because as we've seen for the arena inquiry, the questioning that happens, and quite rightly so, we know harms were caused to people because of things that happened. Now, you could argue that a well-trained and well-thought-out terrorist plan will defeat the best set of defences going on one hand, but on the other hand, did we make mistakes as the NHS and as the wider blue light services? Yes, we did. And the report itself talks about training 652 times. Now, if an inquiry report mentions training or the lack thereof that many times, that's a really big red flag for me that says, actually, boys and girls, that's where we need to put in our effort in at this moment in time.
And yeah, I'm 100% with you on that wholeheartedly. That to my mind, that's where we need to be ensuring that we're at. We don't want two sides of it. Our staff getting involved and becoming overwhelmed or in difficulties because of not having the training to do the role, but also from the patient outcome as well. As you've said, a number of people were affected by this, and that's what we need to mitigate and to reduce. I think we've come close to our 11:30, so I'm going to say thanks very much indeed, Stuart. Really good actually chatting to you and putting a couple of sides to the coin, as it were.
Probably certainly if anybody from the audience wants to ask any questions, I'm here for a couple of minutes. If people want to pose any questions direct, I'm happy to answer. Some silence there, Ian.
Yeah, as I say. Think not. Oh well. Nope. Sure. Oh, was that someone? Oh yeah. I see Ben has just put on that he's lost his audio. So we seem to be having difficulties this morning. So I'll say goodbye to Stuart and catch up with you shortly.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Goodbye all.
Thanks. Bye.
Goodbye all, and thanks very much indeed those that are on.